Violence may win the battle, but it will never win the soul. That is a truth written not just in history, but etched into the very fabric of human conscience. We have seen empires rise through force, dictators rule through fear, and movements fall beneath the weight of their own fury. But we have also seen something more powerful, the quiet strength of those who chose a higher road, who bore the weight of injustice without lifting a weapon in return, and in their suffering they achieved something violence never could, the transformation of hearts. You see, violence can silence a voice, but it cannot silence truth. It can break a body, but it cannot break the will of a people determined to be free. It can scatter crowds, but it cannot scatter the seeds of justice once they are planted in the soil of righteousness. Violence may take the microphone for a moment, but it can never write the final chapter. That chapter belongs to those who endure. That chapter belongs to those who walk through the fire with dignity, who face hate with love, who meet cruelty not with retaliation, but with resolve. When we fight fire with fire, we risk becoming the very blaze we claim to oppose. But when we fight injustice with peace, with clarity, with the unshakable strength of nonviolence, we stand as a mirror to the world, a mirror that reflects not only what is wrong, but what is possible. The soul of a movement is not found in its anger, it is found in its ability to love beyond the limits of pain, to say, "You may strike me, but I will not strike back. You may curse me, but I will bless you. You may try to reduce me to ashes, but I will rise not with vengeance, but with vision." That is the power that changes nations. That is the fire that melts chains instead of forging new ones. For every violent act leaves behind a trail of bitterness, a cycle of retribution, a scar on the conscience of humanity. But every act of nonviolent courage leaves behind something greater, a legacy of healing, a testimony of grace, a light for the next generation to follow. The soul cannot be conquered by bullets or bombs. The soul responds to truth, to justice, to love that will not die, even in the face of death. So let the world hear us not through screams of rage, but through the firm, unwavering voice of peaceful resistance. Let them see that our strength is not in how hard we hit, but in how deeply we care. Let them witness the unstoppable force of people who are unafraid to stand for right, even when wrong surrounds them. Because what we win with violence, we lose in spirit, but what we win with peace, we carry forever. That is the justice that matters. That is the revolution that lasts. That is the victory that redeems. Peace is not the absence of struggle, it's the presence of purpose. Too often, we mistake stillness for peace, silence for harmony, and calm for justice. But true peace is not found in quiet rooms or untouched fields. It is forged in the furnace of conflict, tested in the face of adversity, and proven through the fire of sacrifice. It does not hide from struggle, it walks through it, head held high, heart wide open, and purpose burning bright. Purpose is what gives peace its power. Without purpose, peace is just pause. It is merely the space between storms, not the shelter from them. But when peace is anchored in purpose, in the sacred pursuit of justice, dignity, and truth, it becomes unshakable. It becomes more than an ideal, it becomes a force that moves mountains without lifting a stone, that turns enemies into neighbors, and that transforms suffering into strength. The world does not need peace that sits on the sidelines. It needs peace that steps into the arena and speaks with a voice that cannot be ignored. Struggle is inevitable on the path to justice, but struggle alone does not make change. Struggle fueled by anger may burn bright, but it burns out. Struggle rooted in purpose endures. It does not lash out. It does not lose its way. It keeps pressing forward. guided not by revenge, but by a vision of something better. That kind of peace is not passive. It is active. It disrupts injustice without destroying people. It breaks down walls without building prisons. It challenges systems without corrupting souls. The great leaders of our past, the prophets of justice and the dreamers of peace, did not walk the easy road. They walked through jails, through crowds, through threats, and through shadows, but they walked with purpose. Their peace was not weak. It was not silent. It was bold. It said, "I will not let hate define my steps. I will not let fear dictate my voice. I will not let violence steal my dream." And that peace changed the world, not because it avoided struggle, but because it embraced it with love as its weapon and justice as its aim. When we carry peace with purpose, we become dangerous to every system that profits from division. We become a light that cannot be dimmed, a truth that cannot be twisted, a song that cannot be unsung. And though the struggle may be long, and the nights may be heavy, that peace keeps marching, keeps rising, keeps speaking. Because it knows what it's fighting for. It knows who it stands for. It knows that every soul deserves to live not in fear, but in freedom, and it will not stop until that promise is real. So do not fear the struggle, honor it. Do not run from the weight, carry it with grace, because when we walk with purpose, even the hardest road becomes holy. Peace is not the absence of struggle, it's the presence of purpose. And when that purpose is justice, when that purpose is love, when that purpose is freedom for all, there is no force on earth that can stand against it. True justice stands tall when hate kneels down. It is not born in the noise of anger, nor does it thrive in the chaos of revenge. Justice is a quiet giant, not loud in voice, but thunderous in presence. It does not need to shout to be heard. It needs only to stand firm, unshaken by hatred, unmoved by cruelty, and unwilling to compromise the dignity of any human soul. The measure of justice is not how swiftly it strikes, but how deeply it heals. Hatred is loud. It beats its chest and burns its bridges. It divides hearts, closes minds, and fuels fear. It wears the mask of strength, but trembles at the sight of truth. But justice, true justice, does not tremble. It stands even when the world tells it to sit. It speaks even when silence is safer. It loves even when love is mocked. And when hate kneels down, exhausted by its own poison, true justice rises not to punish, but to redeem. The power of justice lies in its refusal to mirror the methods of hate. Hate is reactive. It spreads like wildfire, consuming everything in its path, but justice is deliberate. It is a builder, not a burner. It creates space for all people to be seen, to be heard, to be valued, and it knows that hatred is not conquered by domination. It is conquered by the unrelenting force of moral clarity. Justice is patient. Justice is brave. Justice walks into the fire not to destroy the enemy, but to rescue the soul. There is something profoundly courageous about choosing to rise with compassion when the world tells you to strike back. There is unmatched power in choosing to forgive when bitterness seems easier. Hate wants to pull us into its pit, to make us smaller, meaner, and more afraid. But justice calls us to rise above it not with arrogance, but with grace. Because every time we meet hatred with love, every time we answer cruelty with dignity, we teach the world that there is another way, a better way, a way that lifts rather than crushes, that heals rather than wounds, that transforms rather than destroys. When hate kneels down, it is not a sign of weakness in justice, it is a sign of victory, for hate cannot stand in the presence of truth, it cannot grow in the soil of love, it cannot breathe in the atmosphere of peace. True justice does not need to retaliate, it needs only to endure, to persist, to shine. Its strength is not in how much force it exerts, but in how much light it brings. And let us not be mistaken, justice without love is simply another form of control. But justice rooted in love, justice wrapped in mercy, justice grounded in human worth, that is the kind of justice that outlives empires and rewrites history. It is the kind of justice that does not wait for perfect conditions or popular approval. It rises because it must. It stands because too many have been pushed down. It lives because the human soul was not made to hate, but to hope. The loudest revolution is the one led by love. Not the love that is soft or silent, not the kind that whispers in comfort, but the kind that roars in the face of injustice and refuses to be silenced. Love that organizes, that resists, that dares to challenge the systems of oppression, not with violence, but with vision. That is the love that turns the tide of history. That is the love that changes everything. We have been taught to associate revolution with rage, with fire, with the breaking of things. But there is a deeper revolution, a mightier one that does not destroy buildings, but builds bridges. One that does not seek vengeance, but demands truth. Love-led revolution is not passive, it is powerful. It is the choice to meet hatred with compassion, not cowardice. It is the strength to hold on to dignity when the world tries to strip it away. It is the discipline to rise up without tearing down the humanity of others. Love-led revolution does not mean we do not get angry. It means our anger is disciplined, it is rooted, it is directed by a higher calling. It means we fight injustice, not with bitterness, but with a fire that purifies rather than consumes. It means we see the humanity even in those who oppose us. We do not lower ourselves to the level of cruelty, we raise the standard. Because love does not mean surrender, love means strategy, it means endurance, it means knowing that if we stoop to the level of our oppressor, we lose the very thing we're fighting for. This revolution is loud because it refuses to be ignored. It fills the streets with song and marches with grace. It writes with courage and speaks with clarity. It lifts the voices of the unheard and carries the stories of the broken into the light. It looks injustice in the eye and says, "You will not have the final word." This revolution does not end with a battle won, it continues every time a child is educated, a law is changed, a wound is healed. It is a revolution of presence, of truth, of unrelenting hope. There is nothing weak about love in action. There is nothing quiet about hearts that refuse to hate. This kind of revolution echoes through time from the sit-ins of Greensboro to the marches of Selma, from the voices of Gandhi's followers to the courage of freedom fighters around the world. They did not need guns, they needed conviction. They did not use fists, they used faith. Their revolution was not fueled by the desire to dominate, but by the dream to liberate, and they proved again and again that love is not the absence of power, it is the highest form of it. Let the world see that our fight is not for revenge, but for restoration, that our struggle is not about conquering, but about connecting. We will raise our voices not in hatred, but in harmony. We will tell the truth even when it's uncomfortable. We will hold the line even when it shakes, because the revolution we are building is not just one of policy or protest, it is one of purpose. We do not need fists to break chains, we need faith. Not the kind of faith that waits in silence, but the kind that moves mountains with every step. The kind of faith that walks into the heart of injustice and says, "You may bind my hands, but you will never bind my spirit." Faith that believes in freedom even when the night is long, even when the struggle feels endless, even when the world tells us to give up. Because chains are not only made of iron, they are made of fear, of silence, of hopelessness, and it is not brute strength, but unshakable faith that breaks them. For too long, we have been told that only force can bring about freedom, that only violence can make the oppressor listen, but history whispers a different truth. It tells of those who stood unarmed yet undefeated, who marched with nothing but conviction in their hearts and justice on their tongues, who broke through barriers not with weapons but with wisdom. These were people who knew that real power is not found in how hard you strike, but in how long you stand. They knew that faith is not just belief, it is action. It is courage, it is the refusal to give in to despair. Faith is the seed of every movement that ever mattered. It is what carried our ancestors through slavery, through segregation, through systems designed to crush the soul. It is what allowed them to dream when the world called their dreams impossible. It is what allowed them to love in a time of hate, to sing in a time of sorrow, to hope in a time of horror, and that same faith lives in us today. It is the fire that cannot be extinguished, the truth that cannot be buried, the light that cannot be dimmed. When we face chains in our lives, chains of injustice, chains of poverty, chains of discrimination, we do not need to answer with fists. We answer with faith that is bold, faith that is loud, faith that believes justice will not just survive but prevail. Our fists may bruise the body, but our faith awakens the soul. Our fists may break a window, but our faith opens hearts. Our fists may silence a man, but our faith raises a nation. Because faith is not passive, it is revolutionary. It is the quiet force behind every great change. It does not scream, but it does not sleep. It rises each day with purpose, and it lays down each night with peace. And let it be known, this kind of faith is not naive. It sees the evil in the world and still chooses to believe in the good. It feels the weight of the struggle and still chooses to carry it. It knows the pain of injustice and still chooses to love through it. This is the faith that builds bridges when others burn them. This is the faith that creates dialogue when others close doors. This is the faith that teaches our children that strength is not in the clenched hand, but in the open heart. Nonviolence is not weakness, it is power under moral control. It is not the absence of strength, but the presence of wisdom. In a world that often confuses brutality with bravery and aggression with authority, nonviolence stands as a bold and radical choice. It says, I have the power to strike back, but I choose not to. Not because I am afraid, but because I am free. Because I understand that true power is not proven by how deeply we can wound, but by how deeply we can heal. There is nothing weak about choosing peace when war is easier. There is nothing soft about holding your ground without raising your voice. Nonviolence demands more courage than conflict ever will. It calls us to stand in the face of hatred with open hands and an open heart. It challenges us to be the calm in the storm, the light in the darkness, the steady ground when everything else is shaking. And that takes strength, the kind of strength that is rooted in principle, not pride. Power under moral control means we are not driven by impulse, but by intention. It means we are not slaves to our anger, but masters of our purpose. It means we know when to speak and when to listen, when to march and when to kneel, when to fight and how to love. It does not mean we are silent. It does not mean we are passive. It means our actions are guided by something higher, by justice, by truth, by the unshakable belief that humanity is worth redeeming. There will always be those who mistake nonviolence for surrender, who think that turning the other cheek means turning away from the problem, but they do not see the power in restraint, the dignity in discipline. They do not understand that nonviolence is not about doing nothing, it is about doing the right thing, even when it's the hardest thing. It is about disrupting injustice without destroying people. It is about confronting evil without becoming it. When we embrace nonviolence, we claim control over the one thing the world tries to take from us, our integrity. We show that our spirit cannot be bought by fear or broken by force. We make it clear that our struggle is not about revenge, but about renewal, that we are not here to dominate, but to deliver. And that message echoes louder than any riot, lasts longer than any protest, and builds deeper change than any war ever could. Nonviolence teaches us that we are not defined by what happens to us, but by how we respond. That our power lies not in destruction, but in direction. That we can be firm without being cruel, relentless without being ruthless, and strong without ever compromising who we are. It gives us the freedom to resist without losing our humanity, to rise without stepping on others, to fight for a better world while living as an example of it.